So this is going to be very vulnerable. You're going to learn a lot about me, a lot about my trauma, a lot about my grief. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the And Also podcast. I'm your host, Madison, and I have been anticipating this episode for literally over 2 months now. Like, this is wild that it's been 2 months. So if you did not know, every week at the end of the episodes, I've been doing a mental health check-in from the work that I'm doing with Shea from Rooted Within. So if you have no clue what I'm talking about, let me fill you in. For the past 8 weeks, I have been doing some very intense grief and trauma healing. I met Shea through my sister, who is just friends with her, and we realized we had so much in common when it came to grief healing and self-growth and all of those things. And we wanted to work together to, one, share Shea's program and the work that she does with my audience, for those of you who are dealing with grief and trauma, and then two, so I could actually try it out for myself and work through some of the really deep things that I had going on. So obviously, for those of you who don't know, I lost my ex-partner of 6 years to suicide in 2022, and that's why I started this podcast. And dealing with the grief from that loss has been the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. It really changed the course of my life and, my career, my friends, my loved ones, like the people I chose to surround myself with, my day-to-day thought patterns. And so because of that, I just found myself in a very deep, dark place. And when I met Shea, it was kind of the perfect timing where I felt ready to start facing a lot of that stuff that had been building for so long. We decided to do the 8-week inner alignment, grief, and childhood trauma healing program. And we have reached the end of the 8 weeks. So we did an episode together at the start of the program, and we kind of recapped what Shea does and how we were going to be working together. And then for 8 weeks, I kept you guys posted each week on what we were doing and how it was impacting me. And now we're going to be doing the recap. So it has been 8 weeks. I have finished the program technically, though I'm still doing sessions with her just to help with future building and what do I want next for myself. And now we're just going to get into how I did, what changes Shea saw, and really deep dive into our time working together and some of the things that I was able to heal through. So this is going to be very vulnerable. You're going to learn a lot about me, a lot about my trauma, a lot about my grief. And if you're interested, of course, in connecting with Shea, her information is always in my description box and included in my grief guide. So check out that all in the show notes / description box. Let's get Shea in here. But before we get started, we got to do that drink of the day, honey. You guys, I've been waiting weeks to try this, and I wanted to save it for when Shea came on because I know that she likes a little prebiotic drink. And this is the Poppy Holiday Edition, the Cranberry Fizz. You guys, I've been eyeing this down in my fridge. When can I drink this? Now's the moment. I love Poppy. I love all things Poppy, every flavor. It's the best thing ever. Let's get into this limited edition. Ooh, girl. Oh, it smells so good. Girl. This, I'm gonna cry. This is so good. I'm trying to have more pre and probiotics in my life because my skin, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, my skin is begging me for some help. So I've been incorporating pre and probiotics for the past few weeks. Lots of fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, prebiotic sodas. And it's so nice that there are things that can actually help your body that taste good and are enjoyable. And I'm someone who does not subscribe to the clean eating and all of the, diet culture stuff. I just want to enjoy things that feel good for me. And this is one of them. Okay. I love prebiotics and a little bit of, soda action. So yummy. 10 out of 10. Love it. Love Poppy. Sponsor me. I'm begging you, please. All right, y'all. So without further ado, let's bring in Shea and let's get into all the things, all the grief, all the trauma, all the things that we've worked through the past few weeks. I'm so excited for you to learn more about me and to hear from Shea again. I know y'all absolutely loved her. Let's get into the recap episode. So I am here with Shea, who I've literally been talking about nonstop over the past 8 weeks. Thank you so much for coming back and doing this like recap episode. You know, every week for the past 8 weeks, I've talked about you, and you know, I have like your information always in my show notes, and I know so many people have reached out to you, and it's just like so amazing. So I'm really excited to talk about like everything that we have been through.
Yeah, no, truly. Thank you so much, Madison, for bringing me back. It has just been such a journey over the last 8 weeks of really getting to know you and really getting to know just all that you've been through, and to see your growth and to have an opportunity to really just like affirm everything you've been saying in the last 8 weeks. It's my pleasure.
There's like so much to get into. I feel like we were just saying before, you know, we started the camera, we were literally strangers.
Yeah.
Last time we were sitting here, and I had no idea how much my life would change and how much my self-perception would change, and just, I don't know, I remember at that time being so done, like just so burnt out, so exhausted emotionally, physically, zero structure, full-blown chaos all the time in my brain, in my life, and just trying so hard to like people please, and it was not even like a conscious thing. Almost, it was just like so normal for me to just be running on empty, but also doing everything for the sake of everyone else. Just in search of self-worth and approval and validation. And now thinking about today, I'm like, I can set boundaries and like do what I want to do and have a life that's not full of chaos and like stress and just intense everything all the time.
In 2 months.
In 2 months, like
in literally 8 weeks. Like I think like that is the most like amazing part, is because a lot of times when people come to me, like they've been in therapy for 1, 2, 3 decades.
Literally me.
And, right. And they've been literally just like showing up, repeating the same stories, struggling with the same things day in and day out. And I feel like the coolest part about the journey with you has been like each week you've come to me completely honest and transparent. Some weeks being like, I feel like a different person. I feel like so good. And then other weeks like, okay, like I'm feeling a little stuck. This was a really hard week for me. But each week we would just tailor the practices and the sessions to really meeting you where you were at. Because of your transparency and your vulnerability, that's why you are just like a completely different person 8 weeks later.
There were so many like key points throughout the whole experience where I thought that like it was over for me. Like I was like, well, I feel awful this week and there's no possible way for me to like come back from this. To get back on track. And then it's so cool to know that like healing is not all or nothing. Like you're not gonna be always on a high. You're not always gonna be low. It's just gonna be like whatever the day brings, just having the skills to like deal with it and figure out what's gonna work, what's not gonna work, what you're feeling, what you need, what you don't need. That's been huge for me.
Yeah, it's been really cool to, especially for someone like you that has a hard time reaching out and really asking for support. I think it's been so cool when you have reached out, because like Madison has mentioned, we use a platform called Telegram, and I check in with her almost every day just to see how she's doing. And I always make sure I tell my clients it's pressure free. There's no need to get back to me, but it's just someone who truly does care about you, cares about how you're doing, and just wants to hold you accountable and support you in your goals. And so for someone like you who does have a hard time reaching out for support, when you would reach out, it was such a cool moment to say, I'm here, what do you need? And for you to say, you know, I'm really struggling with this. Do you have any recommendations of like what I should turn to right now? Is there like a best practice for me to kind of do to work through this so I don't get stuck in it? Which is really amazing, because like we've talked about, we have these things called pain bodies, and pain bodies occur when we are in a negative vibration and we don't know how to get out of it. And quite frankly, we don't really want to get out of it because it feels more comfortable.
Yeah, it's so easy to just like sit there and be like, life sucks, this is all awful.
But for you, pretty early on, we recognized when you are in a fear response or when you're overwhelmed, you either want to crawl into a ball, or you want to run.
It's the one of two things. It's like I want to get in my bed and never be seen, or I want to like get on the treadmill, tie up the sneakers and go. Like,
and for you to really recognize that in yourself and then serve as like a signal of like, hey, you're kind of at your breaking point. Yeah. Let's realign so that we don't stay stuck there. It was really cool to see you not get stuck there. Ask for help, whether it was to me, to your boyfriend, to a family member, or to one of your good friends.
Yeah.
It was really cool to see that each week you showed up and you really tried each practice to say, okay, you know, maybe this practice isn't the most helpful during this moment, but when I'm at this place, it was really helpful and it really provided a lot of clarity.
As soon as you start incorporating self-care, it's so hard to start. Mm-hmm. But once you're like in it, it's so easy to like have all the other things fall into place. Yeah. Like as soon as I started having more self-worth, it was then easier to be like, I need to clock out of work at 5 o'clock. And I need to eat generally. And, you know, fuel my body, or I need to stretch because I'm feeling like fight or flight and I feel really tight. And I know the only way out of this is to move my body. Like once you start developing that self-worth and that like safety in yourself, it's so much easier to like do all the things that like they say you're supposed to do to take care of yourself. Yeah. But it's always hard when you don't have self-worth and someone's like, well, why don't you just try like going to the gym or eating healthy? And it's like, well, I have zero desire to do that because I don't care. Mm-hmm. I really don't care how my body feels. I really don't care how much I'm sleeping. Like it is what it is. Yeah, like getting to that point of feeling, I guess like I owe it to myself to do those things is huge. And I think getting into those habits just helps with everything else so much.
And even just to see how like it was really a building block for you to be like I'd encourage you, just take 5 minutes in the morning to just check in with yourself, whether it's taking a deep breath or just getting up and showering, but like really nurturing the part of you that just needs to be grounded and refreshed before you start your day. 5 minutes probably at the time was like, okay, I'll see if I can manage that.
So dramatic, like I can't.
Right? And then now you're like, yesterday you leave my office and you're like, I have nothing to do later today and I'm just gonna go home and just like take care of myself. And I'm like, wow.
I went home, I made like the best lunch I've ever had, like drank my kombucha, hung out with the cats, journaled, wrote down all my goals for the new year, like all my business goals, all my personal goals. Like I would never have done that. Or it would have just been something I did because I felt like I had to, because that's just like what you do when it's the new year or like when there's a new chapter. But I was like, no, I want to like really think about what do I want for my life going forward? And not in a way of like we were saying yesterday in my session, you know, I want to reach like 1 million subscribers and I want to make all this money from my podcast. It's like, but why? And how are you going to get there? And what does this mean to you? And what does this actually look like in terms of how much work you're going to have to do? Is it realistic? Mm-hmm. How do we start small? I just never had those thoughts before, and they feel a lot more natural now. I think so many of us were not taught these skills. For a lot of us, our parents also grew up in fight or flight, and like they didn't feel supported. They didn't feel seen. And so they struggled a lot to give that to us. That's really hard for everybody because you want to help them, you want to help yourself, you don't know where to even begin. And so like relearning and rewiring those parts of you that are just in survival mode and not thinking about the bigger picture and not thinking about what's best for you, it's so unnatural and it's so hard. They know like so many people can relate to that.
And, you know, a big thing, a part of my program and the work that you and I have been doing together is you have been learning new tools to rewire your brain, to feel safe within your body. But I really think the biggest thing that has helped you is there's been like actual blocks within your body of like, I'm not good enough, I have to do this so I don't let people down, whatever those limiting beliefs are that keep us from actually doing the major things that we want in our life, whether it's forgiving someone, learning how to actually process through grief, whatever it may be, there's like a block in our body that's telling us like we want this, or we don't really know if we want this, but we know we should work through this, but we just don't know how.
That's where I was at 100%.
Yeah. And so really, you've described them in some of your other podcasts, but really what that has looked like is for you to be able to come to a session and say, you know, this week, this really triggered me.
Yeah.
And a lot of weeks, because you're someone that just keeps moving because you've lived in fight or flight, sometimes it would be hard for you to think, okay, I know I'm feeling this emotionally. I have like this brain fog, or I'm just feeling like this dread.
Yeah.
But I don't really know what it is, or I don't know like where I'm actually feeling it.
That's a really big thing. I did not realize how much numbness I have, because I'm someone who's so self-aware, but I think I've used self-awareness as like a mechanism of like self-protection and shutting down and dissociating from my feelings. It's like, okay, I know it. I know what I'm feeling. I understand it. That's that. Goodbye. I'm done. And I'm just going to keep working and grinding and not resting, not taking care of myself, to the point where then when I try to recall those emotions, I literally can't, because I have completely shut them out of my entire system, or so I think. And that's the thing, is they don't go away. And it's so funny saying that out loud, because it's like, I know that and I preach that, but actually practicing that, I didn't even realize that I wasn't doing that. It's like you almost convince yourself that you are, so that you don't have to.
The rational side of you just kind of rationalizes through it. Like, okay, yeah, I thought about it. I felt the anger, the sadness. I just need to keep moving.
Yep.
But in our sessions, it's an opportunity to actually say, okay, but that did bother you, and let's get under it. Let's not just talk about it, but let's actually get under it and really find the root of why it's really bothering you. And so without going into details, you know, yesterday you came into session and you felt really passionate about something in a like a righteousness, like anger way. Like you felt very like passionate about it because you care.
We can share it if you want, because I'm
totally up to you.
I'm super comfortable with it. I think it's such a relatable thing, like with the new year. And even just like holiday celebration, and dealing with grief, it's really hard to be like, oh, yay, 2025, and Regis is dead. And that's always sitting there. It was so hard for me this year to do the whole New Year celebration thing. And the grief was really loud. And we kind of discovered I have this feeling of like, I have to celebrate him. I have to, every anniversary, every holiday, every milestone, like I have to make sure that Regis is like seen in that.
I validated that because you care about him and because he was such a big part of your life. But I knew that there was something even deeper of like, because we had this realization of every time there's a big milestone, anniversary, you can feel this dread, this anticipation, this anxiety. And I really wanted us to work through that so that when we do end our time of working together, you know, okay, this is a normal part of an anniversary coming up, a milestone coming up. I know these feelings are normal. Instead of getting stuck in it, how can I really celebrate Regis? How can I grieve through it while still living and while still being able to move throughout my life and be able to do the things that I do enjoy while also giving Regis the recognition that he deserves, right? And so underneath that, we really found something deeper. And when you were allowing yourself to really feel it and process through it, something from childhood came up. And, you know, you said when the memory came up for your childhood,
that's so crazy how that happens. Like,
yes, you were like, whoa, like did not really realize like that's where it stemmed from. You know?
And it comes up so naturally too. Like, it's almost like, how did I not see that link there? Like,
because the rational part of you, right, just wants to rationalize.
And I didn't tap into that deeper experience and like, how it physically feels when I am feeling this way about Regis, and how that's linked to just like so many other times I felt that way throughout my entire life. Like being able to make that connection of like, okay, this thing that happened to me 9-10 years ago is part of why I get this like this righteousness and this like anger and frustration around anniversaries and being able to grieve the way I need to grieve.
Right.
Because that was something I just never had. Giving that to myself now, it's like you almost kind of overcorrect. Like I almost like get way too obsessed with the whole grieving right and celebrating and, you know, honoring to where it becomes like harmful for me.
Yeah. So at the end of the session, your perspective didn't necessarily change of like, well, I'm just going to totally forget like giving Regis recognition, because that's not what we were going. That's not what we were going for, right? Like we wanted you to be able to still grieve, to still celebrate, to still give Regis the recognition during those anniversaries and during those milestones. What we were just trying to work through to see what was underneath this that brings up this dread and this anxiety, right? So how did you feel at the end of yesterday's session after walking away from it?
I felt a lot different. I felt, you know, like I said yesterday, I'm already thinking about his birthday coming up in March and like, what am I going to do and how am I going to make sure it's like, you know, organized and great and celebratory. But I just felt like I could take a deep breath from that and just, when I think about it, be like, okay, whatever happens that day. It doesn't mean that he doesn't matter to me. So there was that piece. And then I just like generally felt like less anxious, less like physically uncomfortable. Less like my shoulders were like squeezing up to my neck. And I just, I just kind of felt more aware of the things that really sit with me. And like, just the realization of like, wow, I actually do get like really stuck before an anniversary every single time. And I didn't realize how much of a theme that was for me. Like I just thought that's what you do. That's what I do. That's how it is. But like there is a reason for that. For me, it's just like one of those things. So being able to understand that is really, really big.
Yeah, for sure. I think that sometimes when we are experiencing something that does feel just so overwhelming and anxiety provoking, it is so easy to stay stuck in it because there is a deeper cause of why you're feeling this way. And so not to say that you didn't leave still having some of the same emotions, but really the goal of all those sessions is that you don't feel like it's like a weight that's like dragging you down. It's like brought to the light. It's like worked through, and there's like a new perspective and a new like awareness around it, so that when it does come up next time, you know how to work through it and you understand why it's coming up.
I'm someone who's so big on like understanding why, as you've probably noticed, and like getting the answers, getting the facts, processing it, understanding it. The piece I was missing was applying it after, because I do like understand a lot of my feelings, and some I just completely am numb to. But now like knowing that when it does come up, I'll be like, okay, I can figure out where this is all stemming from, and then I can say, this is what I want to do with that from here.
So every time a client reaches out, I always ask them, what are 3 big goals that you have? Obviously, there can be more than 3, but typically there's 3 main things. And for a lot of times it's people, they don't feel good enough, they lack confidence, they just feel like an overwhelming pressure, anxiety in their life, and it just keeps them stuck. That's an overall theme in my work. Stuck in grief, stuck in depression, stuck in anxiety. I have my clients fill out a form in the beginning, and then our first session is really just diving into why do you feel stuck in these areas? And how do you want to feel at the end of the 8-week program? And so I highlighted a couple things that you wrote in your initial intake form. One of the biggest things was you really wanted to find ways to work through grief and trauma. And, you came to me and you said, I know I have grief. I know I have trauma. I've been talking about it in talk therapy for the last 10 plus years, but now I really want to work through it and learn how to actually apply these things to my life when they come up outside of session. I really saw the way that you took every practice. In the first week, you mentioned it in your first podcast. Meditation was something that you really resisted because you knew you were going to have to face feelings, emotions, sensations that, you might have just been suppressing because you didn't want to face them because they were so heavy and they were overwhelming. And so despite that, you gave everything your best shot. And even if it wasn't a full 10-minute meditation, just taking a couple moments to take a deep breath, to really connect with your body, or even say, hey, to your spouse, can you do this with me and try this with me? You are really, really great at just really reaching out for help and really just applying them and seeing what practice worked and when in your life.
Right. I mean, meditation itself, it's been like such a, so for a long time, it was one of those things that almost, I felt like people would like weaponize it against me. Oh, well, have you tried meditating? Like, it happened a lot actually right when Regis died. Yeah. I had someone in my life that was their thing. Like they would just be like, okay, well, like you're grieving, meditate, just try meditating, just meditate. And I tried and I was like, well, this isn't helping. And it was like almost becoming this like thing I resented because everyone was telling me it was the right thing to do. But I think at that time, like I needed to just survive. And anything that I tried that wasn't working would just make me feel like I was more and more and more wrong and more just like failing over and over. And so I had this idea of it that like, it's what you're quote unquote supposed to do. It's supposed to work and it doesn't work for you. And therefore like something is wrong with you. I can't sit here and be like, I meditate every day and it's so great. But it's definitely more for me. Now I understand the value of it. And I also understand that meditation doesn't have to be this 20-minute, like going deep into like some dream vacation spot in your brain. Like it can just be, I wake up and while I feed the cats their breakfast, I take 5 minutes to just sit there and to just like take some deep breaths, set some intentions for my day, and then it can be done. It doesn't have to be this like extravagant whole like setting aside an hour, like laying out your yoga mat, like listening to the music. That just doesn't work for me. And like my ADHD goes a little kooky when I'm doing something like that. Or for me, sometimes it's like I'm better with yoga and like moving my body while I'm taking those deep breaths, while I'm focusing on myself and my body and my thoughts, like laying there still and just like, that was always a vision I had of it. And it's not necessarily accurate. Like that could be how it is for some people, but like for me, it's not realistic.
And there are guided meditations that I do provide that do help you really feel through the things that you're feeling. And I also provide meditations that are like, can you just check in with yourself? Can you just check in? And
that's really helpful. Like the guided, because if I'm just left to my own devices, I'm going to be in my head like, what do I want for breakfast? Why did I screw up that one time? Like,
Exactly. So for you to know that like, okay, either I'm feeling these big emotions right now and I just need to move through them, not stay stuck in them, not amplify them so I feel like I'm going to die, but just to be with them and just to nurture the emotions and the sensations that are surfacing for you. That is a tool that you now have. But again, because before you were just always in fight or flight, always just overworking to just suppress the grief and just the sadness that you were experiencing. Now you have a tool to just check in with your body, notice how you're feeling, and really just regulate your nervous system.
Right.
And what regulating your nervous system, because I feel like that is so like overused in this generation. In my program of regulating nervous system, it really just means feeling safe within your body.
Yeah.
Not feeling out of body, chaotic, overwhelmed, always feeling spread thin. It's just a touch point to just check in, to ground yourself, and just to say, okay, how am I feeling and what do I need right now?
Yeah, it doesn't mean like face masks, red light therapy, and like, you know, running 20 miles and journaling, I mean, if that's for you, good hours. For you. Yes, like those things are great. Yeah. But sometimes regulating your nervous system can literally be just like a deep breath and just saying like, okay, what do I need right now? Right. And I think that's another thing I've always struggled with meditation and just like overall like wellness. It's been hard for me because I always feel like it's portrayed as so all or nothing. Like it can't just be like, okay, I'm going to take a small step by having a really nutritious meal today. And that might not be perfect. It might be one meal. Right. You know, it might be I have something really like nutritious in the morning and then I have, you know, Burger King for lunch. Like it's all about the small things. And I think oftentimes it's just, it feels like it's so huge. It feels like, okay, today I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat 3 nutritious meals. I'm going to, you know, journal. I'm going to have time to work my job. I'm going to, you know, and it feels so overwhelming.
And it's not sustainable.
No, it's not.
And then it does lead to burnout and feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. And then feeling like you're not good enough. Right. It's cool to just take it like step by step and incorporate things that actually do work for me because it's not a one size fits all. And I think that's like a huge misconception. And I like that you didn't force me to like meditate or make me feel bad about not being able to do certain things that just didn't work for my brain. Like we always found something else that works better. I prefer to do like the worksheets, like things I could see, things I could write out, things I could analyze. Yeah. That for me was way more grounding than sitting there and being like, oh my God, why is my brain like not participating in this thing, you know?
Yeah. And then, you know, in session, you and I did a lot of the feeling and processing and really moving through those bigger things related to grief and to resentment and anger that you had in just different areas of your life. And in those moments, not that it was easy, but you did a really good job just surrendering to it and working through it because you knew these were things that you needed to work through. Right. And so that's why it's okay if there's some things that work better for you when you're home and then you know in session, like you're going to be able to move through these bigger things that might feel scary to do on your own.
Yeah, and you just like don't even know where to start sometimes when you're on your own. It's like you want to, but it feels overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. So that was definitely a huge thing that I've really, really seen you work through. Even in our first session, you know, you said, I'm probably not going to talk about Regis.
Yes.
Unless like you really like encourage me
to. I need to be so pushed to do this because I will tell myself I'm completely fine with what happened. I'm completely fine with the situation. Like I've sort of in my head like justified it enough to where I'm like, I'm good. Like I don't need to deal with this. And that's so obviously not true.
Yeah. So it was really, you know, cool to just see each week. It just seemed like it got easier for you to say, you know, this reminded me of Regis, or I did this because like in honor of Regis. And each week it seemed to get a little bit easier. And it seemed like you were able to really move through the grief and all the emotions that came with it in a way that was just more compassionate towards yourself versus like, I need to grieve or I need to do this. Yeah. Because otherwise, fill in the blank, right? Yes. So I really just saw the way that even your 25th birthday, you know, that was a really big,
so hard,
emotional time for you. And for us to really go into that and really explore what was so hard about it. And then for you to come out of that session just feeling lighter and to have more awareness and acceptance around it. Yeah. You were able to go to your birthday feeling just a little bit lighter and feeling like you had a different perspective than this is going to be the worst day of my life. You were able to hold space. This is going to be hard and I can still have time with my friends and really enjoy the celebration.
Yeah, and I think the old me like never would have talked about that feeling with my friends or my support system. And now I find myself like talking about these things and saying like, hey, just so you guys know, if I'm depressed on my birthday or if I'm like really out of it or not like myself, this is why. Also seeing that they're there to support me, and like them showing me that support, that's been huge.
And I would say that was another big thing that you worked through, is just really letting your guard down and letting people in. In the beginning, you had the awareness of, I don't want to let people in or tell people that I'm struggling because I have this core belief that I need to do everything on my own. I just need to work through it, move through it, and just get through the next thing. And you realize like that's just not sustainable. You're not really working through it. You're just moving along. Like you're right? And
survival mode, like.
Exactly. And so when we did really the deeper inner processing, you realize like not only you knew where it came from, but you found like the memory of like when you really felt that way. And you were able to like nurture that 4-year-old girl who did feel like alone, right? And say, hey, like, I see you. I know how hard this is, and you're not alone. And I feel like from that place, you've been able to not only receive that from other people, but also just have the capacity to give that to other people in your life.
I spent a lot of my adult years just like people pleasing and trying to be a support system for everybody else, but not giving myself that same space. And I didn't realize how far back in my life that has been there. And just constantly feeling not seen, constantly feeling very alone and kind of on my own, and like I couldn't ask for help. Like I was sort of the problem child always growing up, and how much that belief has like stayed at my core. It's not 100% healed, and I think it will take so much of my life to like remind myself constantly that that's not true. But being able to take those first steps, I think, is the hardest, but it's also the most necessary. And I feel like that's something we really focused on pretty much right off the bat. Like that was a huge thing for me to get any further. I needed to realize that like I'm not a problem, and I'm allowed to ask for help, and I'm allowed to be hurt, and that people are going to listen and they are going to care.
And I think something that was really cool is from the get-go, you told your spouse like, hey, this is hard for me, but when you do see me struggling, like I want you to encourage me to like ask you for help, or for him to say, what do you need? What can I do for you? Is there like a tool that you've been working on with Shea that you can do? And I think that's so important, because this journey, it can be like lonely if you're the only one that's doing it. And so for you to bring your people into it and say, hey, this is what I'm working on, can you just like support me in this when you do start to see me like spiraling? For like him to be like, yeah, of course, like what can I do? Can I sit here on the floor and do a practice with you? Like, can I get you anything? And then for him to really like affirm these things in you was just really cool to see.
So great. He's so supportive, and I think he's also helped me so much give myself the space, because he's just really good at reflecting things back to me and not just trying to fix it. And I think that's like a huge thing I've had with opening up in the past with certain people. Like they want to help so bad that they'll just try to like fix it, and some things just aren't fixable. And I think it's so nice that Jake has just been able to say like, you know, I can't change how you feel, I can't fix this, but I'm here to just listen, and would it help to do A, B, or C? And like just being so, I don't know, I say this all the time to you and just like all my friends, like I literally don't know how he's real. Like he's so supportive. He's just taught me so much about myself, and he's given me so much space to heal and to just work through the really hard stuff. I just cannot even like thank him enough for being so helpful.
Shout out to Jake.
He's so great.
It's such a gift. My husband just went through the inner alignment program, and for us to like have the same language of like, hey, do you think we should practice neutral mind right now, because I feel us getting a little negative? And in the moment it's like, okay, you're probably right.
This is so annoying and I don't want to do it, but like it's gonna be better. Like this could drag on for days, or we can just deal with it and address it.
So to have someone in your corner who lives with you, who does life with you daily, it is so nice to have that like common language to like support and keep each other accountable.
And just to be around someone who's so grounded and calm. And we've discovered / I've always known I'm a super negative thinker. And I always see the negative first and foremost. He's like neutral positive, I would say. So we're very opposite in that regard. And just having his perspective be so neutral and so grounding has helped me to see less black and white. This sucks. This is miserable. Like there's no way out of this. Like he's like, well, have you tried this? Can we do this? Does it, like it's so great to have that balance.
For sure. And I think for people who are negative thinkers, it can be really hard to not merge with other people's negative behaviors and mindsets, because you could probably agree. Like
I soak it in like a sponge as soon as I see it. Yep.
But what was really cool when, halfway through the program, when there was a really heightened situation, you were able to say, I'm going to create a space for people who are feeling really emotional and just negative.
Yeah.
Instead of merging with that, I'm just going to hold a space for them, to give them space to be negative, to have their emotions. And I'm going to give them a space to also hold them in truth of, but you're here right now.
Yes.
You're safe.
Yes.
I see you. You have a supportive community, and there are a lot of good things to come. So I think that was so cool to see you practice that.
Yeah.
And really start teaching people in your life, because it's one thing to start practicing it, but then it's another thing to really start embodying it and really living it out. And that's what I've seen you do so well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And to just like see my friends also talk about really hard things and trust me with that, and trust each other, and just it's almost like a domino effect. Like when one person starts to do the healing, people catch on, and then other people become interested, and then you start to just like naturally heal together. And I think through this process, I've seen so many of my friends like open up to me in new ways and just work through their own stuff in their own ways. That is so cool. And I always say, like, the more people that start healing, the better the world will be. The more people that are educated about their own experiences and feelings and how they process and how they think, like there's so much good that can come from that. And even though it's comfortable to not do that, I know this might not sound believable, because it didn't sound believable to me, but once you start doing it, it's a lot more comfortable to do it. Because then you realize what you were sitting in for so long, and you realize the pain that you were in for so long, and you're like, I don't know how I lived in that. I don't know how I didn't like have a heart attack, or I don't know how I didn't like have a complete mental breakdown over the last few years. Like I don't think I could ever live in that place again.
It's like going to the gym. It's like
literally, it's
you
like
have
sucks so bad.
So much resistance
like,
to
I don't want to get on that treadmill.
And then once you get there, you're like, okay, wait, this isn't so bad. And then you leave feeling like $1,000,000.
You never regret a workout. Like once you're done, you're like, okay, I did that. Exactly. Like I feel good. The endorphins are flowing.
Exactly.
But it's hard getting there.
Yeah.
It's way harder to get there. But then you get the routine, and you start to see progress, and you start to feel better.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize, like, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how much you're in this cycle of like pain and literal suffering.
Yeah.
Until you can like look back at it and then be like, oh, that's not healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Madison, I feel like we've been talking for a long time now.
Really have.
I mean, I can keep going. I literally wrote like
a whole thing,
2 full pages, and like that was me like cutting it off, because I was like, I could keep going, but the podcast is really only an hour. But I just want to just end with just saying, like, I just really saw you just be willing and open to everything that we worked through in the program. And I think that's what I would recommend to anyone who is just interested in getting out of this cycle. Is just be open. Just try it. Just like going to the gym, just like trying a new routine. Like, just try it and see how you feel. And you really just exemplified that like so well. And I always appreciated your honesty, because if there was something that didn't feel good or didn't resonate or you had a hard time with, we were able to chunk it out and say, okay, what would feel better for you then? Like, what would align more with your everyday life, with how you're feeling, so that we can really make this a sustainable program for you.
Right.
And so the last two major things that I saw Madison work through was, like we mentioned, she was really struggling with setting boundaries for herself because working, being with people, whatever it was,
entrepreneurship,
right, it felt more comfortable, it felt easier to just keep going.
Yes.
So like staying up until 1 a.m., working past like all hours of the night and not eating well and just really like neglecting
coffee
yourself. Yeah.
Like, I didn't have any coffee today, so clock it.
Clock that. It was just so amazing to just really see you nurture those parts of yourself that you've been neglecting for so long. And without really like having a structured routine, how are you supposed to really nurture those parts of yourself that are neglected? So really, really proud of you for creating structures and rhythms in your life that did feel in alignment. And now, like, it was hard for you at first to imagine like not working past 5, and now like you have a whole skincare routine, and now you have a whole like you enjoy like cooking and doing things that like feel really good for you because you feel safe to do those things. And I think that people do stay stuck in the rhythm of working and just numbing and distracting because being alone and taking care of yourself can feel really uncomfortable, but you have really been able to feel safe within yourself, which has allowed you to really start enjoying your free time because you've been able to tap back into the things that you really do love.
Yes.
And guys, if you haven't been listening to all of Madison's podcasts, what I did is I went through the last 8 weeks. Her voice, like your voice is literally like just more joyful. It's more peaceful as the weeks have gone on. And I really do think it's because you've really been nurturing those parts of you that have been neglected. So I'm just so incredibly proud of you.
Thank you. I literally could not have done it without you. Truly, like, you have completely changed my life. I'm so happy that we decided to do this and that things unfolded the way that they did. Like, I'm so grateful for it. And I know I've said this a lot, but I know the first step is really hard. And for those of you that are listening or watching, maybe like for some people, yes, if this sounds like something you want to do, like reach out to Shea, set up a consultation. And then for some people, like if this sounds really overwhelming and too much, like just keep in the back of your mind that there are options out there and that you don't have to be stuck in the cycle forever. Start small. Like it doesn't have to be, like I said, this whole like rigorous thing, you know, all at once. Just start implementing small things and it can really change the course of your life and the way that your everyday looks.
Yeah. Well, I'm so proud of you, Madison. I do want to ask you just one more question.
Yeah.
Just to end here, for the folks that, you know, are maybe thinking about like starting a program like this or really prioritizing themselves. You know, when we first met, you were really like, I've done therapy. Like you kind of knew how talk therapy worked. You knew the right things to do, right? And so almost doing something like this was like, well, I've already done something similar, so like I'm good.
Yeah, like closed off a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of like apprehensive.
Which I don't blame you for because you have gone through a tremendous amount of grief. You've really done a lot of processing. You have really worked through things already, but of course there are always things that we can always be working through. So let this like just be, we are all a work in progress and our inner work will never end at just 8 weeks. But what was the thing that really made you say, okay, like I'm gonna give this a shot, even though I feel like I know the right things, I know how to take care of myself. What was like the thing that really made you say, okay, I'm gonna give this a shot?
I was feeling so awful at that point in my life, literally 2 months ago. It feels like a year ago. Right? I was in such a bad place. I knew for a long time that I wanted to do something.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had exhausted all the options I knew of. And all the things that people said were supposed to work were just not working. And I kind of was so resistant to go back to therapy. When I was in therapy, I struggled a lot because I felt like I'm spending all this time and money and like nothing is happening. And that's not to say that therapy is like bad or that you shouldn't do therapy. I think everybody has a different course of action that works for them. For me, it was not working and I just didn't know like what else to do. Yeah, I reached a point that I'd only been at once before where I just felt like so chaotic, so unwell, so exhausted, so emotionally spent. And I felt almost this sense of the least I could do is try this. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But if it does work, great.
Better than where I am right now.
Yes. Like that's kind of how it felt. Like anything to make this way that I'm living less awful, I have to do it because I actually feel like I'm going to lose my mind if I don't do something. You know, I was at that breaking point, or I knew that breaking point was coming and I didn't want to hit it because I know what it's like to hit it and it sucks and it's hard. And then the thing that made me realize that this was different and this was actually going to help me was the first time we did the feel-in process. I was like really shocked at the things that came up for me. I knew that they were there. They're memories I was conscious of, but I didn't realize how linked those things from childhood were. You know, it feels like such unrelated situations. You know, like you would never guess that this experience when I was 6 or 7 was connected to the way I felt when Regis died. And it made me realize like, wow, this is a lot deeper than me just saying, yeah, Regis died and it sucks and I'm sad and now what? So I think being able to physically feel it was something for me where I was like, oh, this is worth sticking through, even if it is hard.
Well, I am so proud of you, Madison.
Thank you.
I really am. I'm proud of you for giving this a shot. I'm proud of you for coming into each session with just an open mind of this may be challenging, but I know I'm going to walk out of here just feeling lighter and just feeling more grounded and more connected to myself and just having just a deeper awareness and perspective about things. I'm just truly so proud of you. And you know, as we were running through your 8th session, you really hit like all the big things that you wanted to work through, like things that were deeply stored from childhood. Like we were just going through the list and being like, anger and resentment, check.
Like seriously,
grief and trauma, check. And that's not to say that those things aren't still present and that they don't still come up for you, but for you to feel like you've been able to work through them and now feel like you know how to address them when they can and will still come up, it brings so much warmth to my heart to know that you feel strengthened and empowered now. And so really so proud of you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for just believing in me and being there and just for what you do for not only me, but so many other people.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening or for watching today's episode of the And Also podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that you tune in every week. It means so much to me. And, you know, growing this platform is a huge goal for me in 2025. So if you are not already, subscribe on YouTube, give it a like, send it to a friend, or if you're listening on audio platforms, be sure to download the episode, share it with someone, give the show a 5-star rating. It helps me out more than I could ever express. So thank you for all of you who have done that. And that's really it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much to Shea for literally changing my life and for helping me just work through some of these really deep things that I didn't even know were like underlying in me. I love you all so much and we'll see you next week on the And Also podcast. Bye.